Hey, Margie here. Welcome to the Wake Up, Pray Up, Boss Up podcast, the show that helps Christian moms prioritize their physical and mental health so they can boldly step into God's calling. I'm your host, Margie Ruiz. Hey, Margie here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up, Pray Up, Boss Up podcast. I am so excited that you're here today because I want to introduce you to my new friend, Dr. Benjamin Long. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but before I even do that, I'm going to tell you he's a sleep doctor. And I'm super excited about this because my husband is not the best sleeper. And when he doesn't sleep, I don't sleep, and it just creates a thing. So I'm really excited to delve into this subject. So let me tell them all about you. Dr. Benjamin Long is a sleep doctor by day and seminary student by night, my kind of person, with an interest in the integration of theology and sleep. These interests have culminated in the debut book, Sleep Habits Journal, Practices, Prayers, and Devotions to Ease Your Sleepless Nights. He lives in San Antonio, Texas, with his wife, son, and their dog, Rolo. Dr. Benjamin, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me on. I'm super excited for this conversation.
I'm so excited. I heard your podcast and everything you said just touched my heart because I just got back from Fiji in October. I went to a conference at Live Mastery, and there was a sleep doctor that spoke, and he said, I don't know if you've heard this, that lack of sleep is becoming the silent killer in America.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that
Absolutely.
statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think in so many ways, more and more research that we see coming out, if you think about just sleep touches all parts of your body, your brain, your heart, your lungs, your pancreas, your liver, like everything you think about just what the body is supposed to do. And then you add in sleep deprivation, and more research is showing these like adverse health outcomes. And so, something
Wow.
as very basic as just having the time to sleep and how much of a game changer that can be. So yeah, I definitely would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that we wear lack of sleep on our sleeve like something we're proud of.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely I think there's a little kind of striation with the generations. I think I see that a little bit more so with Gen X and above. And I
Mhm.
feel like millennials and Gen Z were kind of like learning from our parents a little bit maybe and saying like, "Oh, like maybe we need to rethink this kind of hustle culture." But certainly those narratives, I think, are even down to the youngest of ages as well. And just that mantra of like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'm just going to hustle to get whatever I need to do done is definitely still prevalent.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to change that. Like you're gonna die sooner if you if you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
start sleeping.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Wow.
I often, people will ask me, like biohack questions of like, oh, well, what can I do to be able to, like get the sleep that I need, but be able to like fill up my day with like whatever I want to do or have this kind of work schedule or all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, you can't. It's like, do you want heart disease? Do you want Alzheimer's, dementia? Do you want, all these chronic diseases? Um, and certainly, is it just sleep? No, it's way more complex than that. But we definitely know if you are foregoing getting a good night's sleep, then you're increasing your risks for all those things.
Wow. So before we get deeper into that, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a sleep doctor? Because I know you had a different path and kind of turned. So I'd love to kind of share that story a little bit.
Absolutely. So my primary training is in pediatrics. I did a 4 years of medical school, and then your postgraduate training can be anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 years, depending upon the specialty. I did 3 years in pediatrics, and really that's what I thought I wanted to do was just general pediatrics. My grandfather was a pediatrician, and that's what I had witnessed and had exposure to. And then as I kind of got towards the end of my training, I realized that this wasn't quite what I was expecting, and there still felt like there was something missing. So I
Mm,
happened to rotate on sleep medicine as an elective, and it just really clicked. And I just fell in love with helping families through their own journeys through the sleepless night, and really being able to have this interesting niche because everybody sleeps. And so whether at least like medically, if I'm talking to a cardiologist, I can talk about things that impact sleep within cardiology. If I'm talking to a
mm.
neurologist, same thing. Talking to someone who takes care of the elderly, pediatrics, all the things. Sleep is this interesting thing where you can just kind of like go out into these other specialties and see how sleep applies to them.
Yeah. It's so funny. My husband's a physician. He's a gastroenterologist, and I hear the stories of training. And my nephew's in medical school right now, and it's shocking to me that they're still doing these things where doctors don't sleep. I mean, it really makes no sense to me. I don't want to be treated by someone. I heard someone say the other day that even if you don't sleep one night, you shouldn't even be driving a car. It's worse than
Right.
being
Yep.
drunk, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Like once you hit about 24 hours of sleep deprivation, we know equivalent to your ability to perform is pretty equivalent to someone who is legally drunk. So yeah, it's like if you wouldn't allow we have rules and laws that prevent surgeons from operating on people while they're drunk for good reason. So the same thing, why do we have systems that allow people to be significantly sleep deprived and still trying to practice medicine? So that definitely the story where you're talking about wearing sleep deprivation as a badge of honor, I think there are still programs throughout the American healthcare medical education system where that is this idea that you can somehow train yourself to be better at being sleep deprived. And to a certain extent, when people tell me that, I say, "Do you think you can train yourself to be better at being drunk? Like, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and
Well,
be better as like a drunk driver, and just with more practice, the more times I'll do it, I will eventually be really
that's
good at driving drunk." Like, no, of course, no one
that's
says that.
horrible.
Right. But yet we have this mindset that it makes us tough. It's something that we can do and get better. And the reality of it is everyone is going to have a little bit different response to sleep deprivation. There are some people who they have some minor sleep deprivation and it really kind of throws them off versus some people who are able to endure a little bit more. So there are individual factors and there are things that you can do to mitigate fatigue, but mistaking that as somehow being a sign of like weakness or strength or something like that, those are definitely two different things.
Yeah, I'm telling you, especially in physicians. I have that battle.
Yep.
It's like you have to rest.
Yeah. Yep.
So why do you think sleep has become such a struggle in our culture?
Wow, how much time do we have?
As long as you like.
Right, right. I mean, I think one big one is just continued connectedness that we have, especially with social media and
Mhm,
screens and the internet and things of that nature, that we are exposed to so much more of what's happening in the world compared to, even 50 years ago,
mhm.
that like our compassion and levels of empathy and things of that nature are just not designed to withhold. If you think about like the normal amount of connections I'm supposed to have for friends, family, neighbors, or things of that nature is way smaller than the connections that now that we can make with the internet. And like it is beautiful because right now, like, we are talking over Zoom, we've never met before, and,
Mhm,
like, we're able to make these cool connections in that kind of a way, so there is this, like, flip side, the good and the bad of it, but definitely, I think with the, introduction of cell phones and you have access to a world of information, like, right at your fingertips, even in my own practice, like, I started in pediatrics really kind of closer to 2017 was the beginning of like my residency training. And just
mhm.
even in that short span of time from 2017 to 2025, that like there's definitely been an increase in the times that I'm talking about anxiety and depression just in the general pediatrics clinic with families and with kiddos. Let alone when
Mm,
I was talking to like some of my attendings and mentors who've been practicing for like 30, 40 years. And they're like, yeah, I never used to talk or diagnose an anxiety disorder or anything like that, or maybe like once a month. Otherwise, most people I'd send to a psychiatrist. Now, like as a general pediatrician, you have to be able to have those conversations, unfortunately. And so I
mhm,
think that is a big component is we have this new technology that we don't have the generational wisdom of having the restraints. And I think we're starting
mhm,
to see that. And so then
mhm,
on like a social level, there are, states and groups that are trying to make moves of like, hey, we need to actually put more restrictions. And like maybe it's not a good idea to give your 7-year-old a cell phone,
mhm.
like we need to
Yeah.
maybe like limit some of that access. So I think that is a big component of it. But you know what's really interesting is that like sleeplessness is not a new phenomenon. Even when we were looking at the Bible, and this is kind of what led me part on my journey into just like, is there something that the Bible says about sleep? We even see that in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the sleep of a man who's like a working man who labors. It's sweet compared to the rich man that it doesn't matter how full his stomach is or how empty it is, that his sleep is still disturbed. So there's this like interesting reflection on that and the sleeplessness of the rich man. And I think that there's something to that in our um, prosperity that, when you have your needs met, that you are thinking less about trying to do those like basic needs. And now you're worrying about all this other stuff that can become its own barrier to sleep. So those
Mm.
are the first two that just pop in my mind.
And I'm glad you brought up the subject. I really, really love how you go into the Bible and talking about sleep because there's this whole topic of social media and then like, I have kids, older than you, obviously, but they were locked away for years. They are middle
Mhm.
school age, and they were connected all the time. It really did some damage. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I love, love, love how you're going back to the Bible. And I love the idea here. I want to make sure that I said it right. You said the idea that deep sleep in scripture is often associated with blessing really caught my attention. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think the way that I try to approach sleep in the Bible, I initially came at it as I'm a doctor and I want to see if the sleep has something to say about the Bible. So I assumed that the Bible would have the same intentions that I had, which is to help fix sleep. And so what
Mm,
you actually find in there is that that's not the goal of the Bible, because obviously the Bible is, God's word to us that reveals who God is, how he relates to his creation, and that overall redemptive story and arc of, a unified story that leads to Jesus and in his life, death, and resurrection is bringing in the new kingdom. And that is, we're in this both. It's here, but we're still waiting for that day for it to come in its fullness. And
mm,
so sleep is a part of that story. It's present throughout all these little parts of it. It's very rarely at the forefront. And so my approach to it is try to look at it as much as possible on its own terms as ancient literature. How are these authors thinking about sleep? And so from the very first pages, especially even just in Genesis, you look at the first two times that the mention of deep sleep in the Hebrew, that's called, the word is tardima. The first two times that is used, there's really this kind of mirroring component to both of the stories. Adam, the very first time in creation that God sees that something is not good is the fact that Adam is alone. And so then
mm,
God uses sleep in this process of bringing Eve to Adam. And the same thing later on in Genesis when Abram, who'll go on to be Abraham, um, is also God sees that something is not good. He doesn't have a descendant. And so then in the process of making this covenant with Abram, same thing, there's a deep sleep that falls upon Abram. And so the way that I interpret that and look at it is that sleep is this part of ordered creation that God gives to us that brings about the right conditions for us to participate in blessing. So, what do I
mm.
mean by that? I think the main thing that I would say is that it helps to facilitate our relationships. If you have a bad night's sleep, you're super grumpy.
Yeah.
Like it impacts
I know I
your
am.
mood.
Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. And so I'm talking about that on a very practical level. But I think, I think of in Jeremiah where he says, at this, I awoke and looked and saw that my sleep was good to me. That there is something
Mm,
about sleep that we know that even ancient authors saw was really refreshing. And so I think how the biblical imagination works is that sleep is this gift from God that He has given us that when we wake up, we are refreshed by it. And so we are able to participate in community with our families, with our friends, with our neighbors, and things of that nature. And so, in that participating in blessing, I get to be a blessing to those around me. And I am also able to receive the blessings of the community and the neighborhood that I am within as well. And so that's how I see it in, especially like Proverbs 19:23, the fear of the Lord leads to life. so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil.
Mm.
That when we God has created certain boundaries for sleep and for life and for creation. And so
Mhm.
when we lean into that ordering and we lean into what God has given us, then we're able to like reap the benefits from it as well. So I try not to go too far into, if I do X, then God is going to do Y or Z,
Yeah, of course.
because
Yeah.
sometimes if we're a little too formulaic, because then what happens when I can't sleep or when I've
Mhm.
had good sleep and my life doesn't look any better, it doesn't look any greater. And so I think it comes back to that idea that sleep is this gift that we do receive from God. And what is our posture towards that? I think that's really the story that the Bible is pointing us toward.
I love that. Because we have a sleep issue in my house, I have looked at some research and things, and I had never heard it from that perspective. It really spoke to me. And then another point that really spoke to me, my mission is to help women prioritize their physical and mental health so they can boldly step into God's calling. I'm very passionate about the fact that people are not stepping into their calling. And if you don't step into your calling, there's no one on the sidelines waiting to step up. And with women in particular, I find that, we want to give all to our families, to our kids, to our friends, to our church, to our school, to everything, and
Mhm,
we don't take care of ourselves. And that's another thing women wear as a badge of honor,
mhm.
So it was getting him back to you have to take care of yourself, right?
Ye
And so you can step into your calling. But I love how you said your research showing that how sleep enhances problem solving and clarity felt especially relevant for people discerning their calling. So if you're
Mhm.
exhausted, maybe you can't even hear what the calling is.
Yeah, yeah, from putting on kind of thinking a little bit about, like, neurologically what's going on to the changes in the brain that when you're sleep deprived, the parts of your body or parts of your brain that we think about controlling more of the reason and problem solving and future planning making and things of that nature seem to be slightly less online, and so then the parts of our brain that are more impulsive and emotional and things like that kind of are upregulated. So really, I think that in some ways that those changes in response to sleep deprivation kind of make it really difficult. But even when you're thinking about creative problem solving, and as you're saying, to think about if God has placed something on your heart, and I feel God calling me to do this, very rarely is that just like one step to whatever God's calling you. Often it's like
Yeah.
5, 10, 20 steps that
Yeah.
you have to like figure out how do I get to this? How am I
50,
faithful?
100,
Right, right. Like, it's not served up on a platter. It's a collaboration, it's a dance,
Mm,
and it is something that you are living into every single day. And so to do that, you're going to have some amount of creative problem solving and critical thinking. And one of the really important steps to that is sleep. So, from a Christian worldview, there is something really beautiful in the fact that sleep is this critical step for us to learn new skills, for our memory to consolidate, and for us to remember things, for us to be able to have that creativity and that problem solving and getting these new solutions to old ideas. For the most part, most of the research would say your stages of sleep, you have non-REM and you have REM. Non-REM has 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3, going to deeper sleep, and then REM is typically when you think of when you're dreaming, and we cycle through those things. In general, what dream research has shown is that non-REM in the first half of the night tends to you do have some dream imagery, but usually it's playing images or instances or things that have happened from your day. It's not really those
mm.
abstract dreams that you have in REM sleep. And then in REM sleep, what we typically think of dreams, I have no pants on and I'm back in high school and I'm like, trying to find something or do something. And you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so the current theory for that is that that non-REM sleep, that playing of these things that are happening from your day, that's really, you can think of it as like deepening those memories into your brain. So, like, I'm learning new things and I need to have sleep to kind of get it down to the part of the storage of my brain in order for it to stay there. Non-REM
Mm,
is important for that. But then REM is this way of kind of our we think that the mind is like trying to take these pieces of information and kind of put things together in order to create these new solutions. And so people who are creatives, whether that's music or art or things, stories or whatever, often see that as well in their sleep. And you will hear stories of people who wake up and they hear a song from their sleep and have to like write it down or write something for a narrative in their book or start painting something or drawing something or things of that nature. And so if you're not getting that REM sleep, then it's
Mm.
harder for you to be able to kind of make those same connections. So all of that to say is all of sleep is important for that problem solving, critical decision making, and things of that nature. And it's really beautiful that that is entirely a process I have absolutely no control over. So if you think about it, that God is the one who is allowing sleep to fall upon me. So really, human understanding and performance, the kind of critical component of it, comes from God. And that
Yeah.
I can do everything I can to have the right conditions for that, but I'm not the one that is, like getting my memory to where it needs to be or, putting the skills, kind of combining things or kind of creating these new solutions. I think from a Christian worldview, you'd really say that that's really God is a part of that. And I absolutely have no control over it. And I have to enter into sleep as an act of trust that God is going to do that work in my life.
But you have to allow yourself to sleep to be able to get there, right?
Exactly.
That's your
Exactly.
responsibility.
Right. Right.
That's awesome. Something else that really spoke to me, you talked about the fact that doctors, and I know this, right? Western medicine, they don't ask you about your spirituality. And you're right. I mean, that's such a part of your life, especially when you're talking about not sleeping and mental health and things like that. I mean, you talked about what did you call it? Sacred secular divide. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that? And that's a real problem.
Absolutely. It's an odd thing because the history of the hospital of medicine is quite religious. If you go back to, around the time that Jesus was alive in the Greco-Roman world, if you were a soldier, you would have access to a certain level of healthcare, or if you were rich, you would have a certain access to doctors. But for everybody else, it really wasn't it. And there really also is this mindset that if you have some illness or something like that, we see that in the Bible that it's something that your parents did or someone else did to
Mhm.
anger the god or gods or whatever, and that's why you are sick. And so it's in the his name is Basil of Caesarea. I want to say it's like 4th or 5th century that he kind of finds this institution that is like the earliest form of the hospital that really is this you think about hospital as hospitality. So it was this city in
Mm.
a lot of kind of discussions of it called the Basiliad. That part of it we think is also some kind of a hospital where anybody could come and have some kind of rest or some kind of care or treatment. And to the point that even like the Roman emperor at the time was like, what's going on with these Christians that they're taking care of like more people are Romans and stuff like that more so than we are. So it was this move that very practically from the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus tells in the Gospels of taking care of the stranger that inspired generations of Christians that really gave us the roots for modern medicine in a real way. And so then it's interesting that in modern American medicine, we have disconnected from that. The relationship between religion and science and that faith and secular divide was really fractured for a variety of reasons. And so I think there is somewhat of a movement to try and at least acknowledge both of those sides and try to bring them together and say that modern medicine in this more like disembodied, I'm taught about the body as your different organ systems, your heart and your liver and your lungs and your kidneys and all this stuff. And yes, we know that you're a person and you live in a society and you live in a culture and all of these things, but very rarely is there any acknowledgement to spirit or to soul and what that means. And so for me, I was very blessed to find resources that talk about how do you obtain a spiritual history from your patients. What is some of the research, around religion and health outcomes at a more broad level? One of the strongest data that we see comes from the nursing cohort study that was this done over a long period of time that found that more so than many of the other variables, just religious service attendance was the strongest or strong predictor of mortality, in that the nurses who attended church were
Wow.
more likely to have like extra years on their life compared to the nurses that didn't attend church. And that's even
Wow.
with looking at other kind of controlling for other variables. So there's this data that shows that, like, okay, religion has some kind of impact on our health, and there is data that's showing that it's like positive. So like, how do us as physicians, what should I do with that? How should I engage with that with my patients? How should I ask those questions? I think that's always like the starting place that I come back to, is there's something here and it's important to many people into their lives. And so us as physicians, I think we have some responsibility to just ask the question. And so for me as
Mhm.
like a sleep doctor, I just ask, is religion or spirituality important to your daily life? And then specifically for their sleep, do you have any practices from your faith that you practice around bedtime?
Mhm.
And so that was another reason that kind of led me into writing Sleep Habits Journal, was because I, found that there were many people who identified as Christians. They said that reading the Bible and prayer was important to their daily life, and yet that wasn't a part of their response to sleeplessness.
Well, since you brought it up, you wanna share a little bit about your book?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, Sleep Habits Journal practices prayers and devotions to ease your sleepless nights. It's made for specifically Christians who are experiencing insomnia, but anyone who's open to a Christian worldview. And it really is trying to bring together sleep medicine and theology into one resource that gives you that practical steps of how do have better sleep habits, but also thinking of it in a Christian worldview, because whether we like it or not, God is the one who is bringing us to each sleepless night. And I
Yeah.
always think about Psalm 77 that talks about, it feels like you're holding my eyelids open, I think is the language there. And I'm like, that's exactly what pretty much most of my patients are telling me. Um, and so, how do I respond to that sleeplessness? And so I wanted to create a resource that was accessible. I also like to say it's the insomnia book for people who hate to read, because there's nothing worse than like, I have 30 pages of a chapter to get through before I can actually start like applying these things. So the book
Yeah.
is all these bite-sized activities that in one way or another are trying to get you farther down that journey and through the sleepless night.
Awesome. So, something else before we go into our 3 clicks, you talked about routine, and it really hit me because it's true. I'm big on morning routine, right? I go to the gym, I have my prayers, I have my thing that I do every morning, but I'm guilty of it, sorry. I don't have a sleep routine. Can you talk about that a little, the importance of having a ritual or routine at night for sleep?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in pediatrics, that is usually the foundation that we're talking about, because all of our lives is some kind of habit that is really driving a lot of things. So if you think of habit through the frame of, I have some kind of signal that leads to some kind of behavior that's going to have some kind of consequence. And we're constantly going through those cycles on multiple times throughout the day. And so um we can develop habits around bedtime that are actually going to become barriers for us to get good sleep. If I'm watching a suspenseful movie or TV show that ends and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to know what happens next, then most likely I'm going to keep hitting that, watch the next episode button on Netflix, and it's going to be harder for me to
You
be able
don't
to
even
go
have
to
to
bed.
hit it. It just
Yeah, yeah.
starts and
It just does it for you.
it's gotten shorter and shorter. Have you noticed? Like, they
Right.
don't even give
Yeah.
you a chance to find the remote. It's terrible.
Yeah, they're like, "Here you go, next one." So that is a habit that in a real way can become a barrier for me for good sleep, and there are multiple different habits. And so part of like a good sleep history is telling like, hey, what is your sleep routine? And actually there are a lot of families that I'll talk to that they are like, it's not the same every single night. Sometimes it's this, sometimes we get home at this point, and then dinner sometimes this point, kind of a thing. And sometimes that is the problem. That is the thing, that like your life is filled with so much stuff, you don't even have any time to be able to wind down. It's different for all people. Some people need 30 minutes, some people need 2 hours, or some people need something in between. But definitely, we're not machines. It's not a light switch. You need something to be able to stop from the day and then prepare for bed. And I think there's something that's really, when you're talking about just like the practices of the church throughout history, there has always been this importance on prayer. Many faith traditions have fixed hour prayer as well. And so I think there's something to that too, in that ordering of our waking and our sleeping of I'm saying this prayer and I am saying goodbye to the day and I am preparing for sleep and for the next day.
Beautiful. I'm gonna work on a sleep routine.
Yeah.
So I always like to leave my audience with 3 clicks of ways that they can implement something they learned today in their life. So number 1 is wake up. What should listeners be aware of? Even maybe realize that there's a problem when it comes to sleep and faith.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes to mind of something they could just wake up to is that there is this connection here and that um, we can so often get so frustrated by the sleepless night that we don't see it as an invitation to connect with God. There was a
Mm,
song that was on like Christian radio of like, what if a thousand sleepless nights or what it takes to know you're near was the lyric. And I think there's
mhm.
something really beautiful in that is there might be so much going on in your day that God is just bringing you to your sleepless nights because he wants to connect with you and for you to experience that. And so understanding the sleepless night is not just something that I am trying to get over, it is an opportunity to connect.
Wow, that gave me chills. So the next question, pray up. Where can they invite God into their rest routines or nighttime worries?
Absolutely. I think anytime that you are faced with a different moment of the sleepless night, that is always an opportunity to connect. In my journal, I break it down into kind of like 5 steps in the sleepless night rules. And
Mm,
so that's whether you're ceasing from your day, whether you can't fall asleep and you're having to rise up out of bed, you're waiting to feel sleepy, you're repeating all of these steps, you're trying not to nap. All of these things are moments in our journey that our spiritual life doesn't stop when our head hits the pillow. All of life that we experience is part of the spiritual life. And it's so easy. I don't think people are trying not to pray. I just think that people don't think to do that and to go to God.
mm,
We too quickly, I think, just go to practical solutions because very American of us. We love a 5-step process to get us from A to Z. And and so like you still might do that process, but God wants to be invited into that. Or at least is inviting you into what he may be doing as well.
beautiful. And so the last one, you kind of said it, but boss up. What is the small action they can take this week, tonight, to steward for them to sleep better?
I think one quick action or one thing that you can do, actually, this is a really good one, is just reflect on your last sleepless night. Take some time to think about it. And I have this activity that's called Light and Sight that you're really just trying to ask the Holy Spirit for insight into what is it that you are doing in my life right now. And sometimes, some people will ask for a word or something that is characterizing their sleepless night as it is right now. And it's just this way to reflect where you are today on your journey. And then
Mm,
it's just the great thing I love about the journal is then you have that to look back to. So anytime that you put that down, life gets busy, you come back 3 months later and you look at it, then there's this real account that you can be like, oh, these are the things that I was worried about that God took care of it in this way. Or this is how I was characterizing my sleepless night way back when. And now it looks like this. So I think a real practical thing is you can just ask God to like think about the night and just really try to see where do I feel like I am close to God, that I'm experiencing his love and his comfort and his joy and his grace and his peace, and when do I feel far away from him?
So, Dr. Benjamin, where can people find you? I think this is such an awesome subject. I want to thank you for being here today, but please tell my friends, where can they find you?
Yeah, the easiest place would just go to sleephabitsjournal.com. That'll take you to my website and you can see everywhere that the book is sold. If you are someone you're like, I want to go to a store and actually buy it, Barnes and Noble is probably your best bet. There are some that are kind of scattered throughout different Barnes and Nobles across America. So that would be a good one to go to. But otherwise, you can connect with me, everything that I'm doing, and sign up for newsletter, social media, all of that stuff.
Thank you so much. It's such an important topic. Please keep speaking about this because when people don't sleep, like I said, I don't have a sleeping problem, but my husband, that it affects everyone. So, thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for bringing faith into it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And
This is
thank
a great
you.
conversation.
Yeah. And
Thank you so
thank you
much.
guys for being here. And don't forget to wake up, pray up, and boss up every day. God bless. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, shout it from the rooftops, leave a rating and a review, all the things. And to catch the latest from me, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at margie.gp6 or go to my website at margieruiz.com and make sure to sign up for my weekly newsletter. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Bye.